So we're going to go ahead and get started now. All right, so for those of you who are joining the call, I appreciate it. We will be going over various sections today of moving Azure workloads into Azure, and we're going to be going over today's agenda. So for today's agenda, we'll be going over who is Oakwood. Oakwood is a gold certified partner with Microsoft. We'll be going over what we do in the industry and how we stand out from the others in the Microsoft space. With the large push into migrations into cloud, especially for this year with the pandemic and the large amount of migration for users to be able to do workloads offline and from home, we'll go through various scenarios as to why you might want to migrate into the cloud this year, as well as an overview of the Azure Migrate tool itself. The Azure Migrate tool has gone over a lot of iterations over the years, and so we'll be going over what the tool does today, what the advantages are over potential other cloud providers, as well as how it can make it more agile and redundant for those that are looking to move into Azure or give it a try for the first time. We will then proceed into the Oakwood process, which our individual process that we do here at Oakwood to ensure that everything is moved up into Azure in a seamless manner, all while maintaining proper governance and security. This starts with a readiness assessment. This readiness assessment goes through an analysis of the environment of what you have on premise today, large amount of architectural and whiteboarding sessions to make sure that what's going to be put up into Azure is not only per best practice from Microsoft, but also works best for the businesses. This then goes into the next phase, which is the foundations phase, which is the actual initial build outs, where then we go into the migrate and modernize phases. We'll talk about those a bit more in greater detail as the slideshow continues, as well as the ongoing process of optimizing and managing the cost, security, governance, and agility of the cloud solution as we go forward. Now, after we're done with the presentation, there will be a Q&A session at the end of this. This is a Microsoft Teams live session, so we do have moderators in the chat who are monitoring the chat. I would encourage you during the presentation to please add any questions that you have into the chat window, and then we will address them at the end as best we can with the team. All right. Main part of the presentation is moving workloads into Azure and who is Oakwood. So I myself, my name is Michael Kaler, and I'm the Director of the Cloud and Infrastructure Operations here at Oakwood. I've been with the company about 5 years now, and I'll be the one giving the presentation here today. Contributors you'll see on the screen here today are ones who have done content for this, as well as moderating the chat today, and will be answering questions a little bit later. So we have Shad Moss, who is our Senior Director of Application Modernization, Tim Hoxma, our Digital Marketing Manager, as well as Mark Riggs, our Principal .NET Architect, and Paul Sears, who is our Principal Software and Cloud Solutions Architect as well. Okay, so who is Oakwood overall? Oakwood's been around since 1981. We've been helping companies all along the road for that entire time frame, help modernize their business, solve business problems, and be able to modernize their workflow as well as a technological standpoint and a personnel perspective for a long time now. We're a cloud solutions provider partner, especially with regards to some of the latest stuff that Microsoft's been doing. We specialize in cloud migrations, application modernization, data and analytics, modern workspace, and this does include Office 365 Teams and SharePoint, Azure DevOps, and managed services. As you can see on the bottom right-hand side of the slide I'm showing right now, that shows our active current gold Microsoft partnerships that we have right now with regards to our competencies with Microsoft, as we are a gold partner with Microsoft. Okay. These are some of the examples of some of the larger clients that we have dealt with, both actively currently and in the past and ongoing. Various projects with many of them, anywhere from Microsoft implementations into the cloud to on-premise deployments as well. So these are some of the clients that we've been working with for a very long time. Okay. Moving to the first section here, a lot of the questions that many people ask, especially when looking at this in generally, is why should I migrate to the cloud? Initially, when the cloud was first proposed as a mainstream operation replacement for data centers, a lot of it was, how does it save me money? How is it a cost reduction over what we already have? Necessarily, that's one way to think about it, but there are other ways to think about it as well. And as we move into this, cloud migrations are growing as they are today, and they are continuing to grow year over year with a large amount of increases, especially in the 2020 timeframe. IaaS specifically, which is infrastructure as a service, is the fastest growing of those subsegments. A lot of companies are looking to move their platforms into Azure from a one-to-one ratio translation or a forklift type of endeavor to get their feet wet in the Azure environment. And this means taking physical servers on-prem or VMs and forklifting them into Azure with the most comparable translation as you possibly would have inside the Azure environment. One of the biggest things you see, and one of the biggest things that we are seeing across the board, is awfully about 80% of CIOs will be pressured by their business leaders to evaluate migrating data centers into IaaS in some cloud solution one way or the other. Now, that's actually seen a huge uptick over the last couple of years because users, like I said, are looking to either modernize what they currently already have. There's aging technology on-prem. Costs are becoming a little too prohibitive with regards to data center upkeep from a hardware perspective, or applications are primed and ready for optimization and modernization through agility and security through cloud operations. And that leads into the larger point at the bottom there, which is Azure PaaS services or platform as a service, which can reduce the time required to manage apps by 80% and the time to deploy a new app by 50%. And these are not just arbitrary numbers. These are things that we've experienced a lot in helping a lot of customers across the road. In transforming those apps, once they've moved up into the cloud, into a PaaS service, can definitely reduce the amount of time it takes to spin them up, manage them, scale them up or down based on the needs of the company going forward as well. So we're living in an age right now where technology is really transforming very quickly, and not all of it is necessarily as slow or as safe as we'd like it to be. But where cloud technology at the core of this thing is helping businesses do what they do best in a more agile manner while maintaining the security and agility of it all throughout the entire process. The cloud is unlocking the power for users to be able to have the freedom to achieve the success they need, especially from developers and application owners, to be able to do what they need to do in a much more sandbox type of environment, to be able to deliver what they need to deliver, but still allowing your security teams and engineering teams on the IT side to maintain that security and the structure that is required to be able to maintain the environment. As lifelong allies in the business of transformation, we know one thing is true overall, and that change happens. And the change agents who pursue this opportunity will be challenged at every turn by the complexity and resistance and uncertainty of the cloud itself. By that, what we mean is that obviously that there's a lot of interest in moving into the cloud, and these are various reasons why you would want to look at potentially moving into the cloud, or to spark conversations with others about this. Data center contracts expirations, urgency of capacity. We've seen a lot of endeavors with clients these days where their storage is reaching capacity, and rather than purchasing new storage arrays or re-upping their environment, they look at moving into the cloud as a potential option as well. Application innovations and delivering applications faster. Applications can be fairly cumbersome, especially if they're homegrown applications. And moving them up into the cloud can make things far more agile and a lot easier to spin up and spin down and control the costs on when compared to an on-premise data center environment. Okay. So there are four major areas we're going to cover here for a little bit, and that's the Azure Cloud for All section that we have here. And they go through the productive side of things, how a hybrid works, the intelligent, as well as the trusted side. Now, these four pillars represent the main values and the propositions for what differentiates Azure from the other competitions out there. Most notably here, as you see in the major proof points we're going to see in here in a little bit, these are the main reasons why customers choose Microsoft over, say, AWS or other providers that are out there. And it's because of that unique value that is provided in this product to be productive, allow for hybrid, intelligent, and trusted cloud solutions. With Azure, you can do or be all of these things at once. There can be combinations of them. You don't necessarily have to pick one or the other. It's all about how you develop it that's best for your company. First, we get into the productive side of things. For this, you get unparalleled developer productivity with integrated tools from mobile DevOps to serverless computing. Now, this goes the wide range of gamut, whether you do IaaS implementations or PaaS implementations up there, whether they're simple web applications or complex multi-tiered applications that you're moving up. The hybrid approach is to develop and deploy where you want the resources to be deployed at, with the only consistent hybrid cloud on the market. You can extend your Azure on-premise with Azure Stack. So for those of you, we'll be going into a little bit more detail on this a little bit later, but Azure Stack Hub allows you to deploy part of Microsoft's hybridization cloud of Azure in an on-prem data center through hardware that you can house in your local data centers if you wish. On the intelligence side of things, you can create intelligent apps that delight with data-driven experiences, go quickly from a concept to release from the Azure Data Services aspect. This includes artificial intelligence, image recognition, bot services, a lot of things that can be done to help innovate stuff that you're already doing today. And finally, last but not least, we have the trusted side of things. You can join startups, governments, 90% of Fortune 500s that trust Microsoft for their security. It's across the board, and it doesn't necessarily have to be relegated to Windows systems alone, as there is a large footprint of Linux systems in Microsoft Azure as well. And this also comes with the highest degree of privacy, transparency, as well as the most compliance coverage of any of the cloud providers out there today. Okay. So diving a little bit deeper on this first section here, there's unparalleled developer productivity in the productive phase of things. You can build applications using the language of your choice. This includes things like, JavaScript, .NET, any of the other major languages that are out there to leverage the best in class of those development tools, whether you're using Visual Studio, Visual Studio Code, on PCs or Mac in general, it does not matter. You can get apps to use to be able to streamline their mobile development cycle faster using Visual Studio Mobile Center, including automated builds and testing. There are a lot of services to choose from, and this is something I want to reiterate on quite a bit. You're not just relegated to Microsoft native tools, not at all. There are hundreds of services out there. You can engage with all of your users in richer ways, whether it be native mobile apps, responsive web apps, new experiences like bots, augmented, AI, mixed reality, things like that. It also uses the best-in-class support by Visual Studio families of tools and 100+ Azure cloud services that support this particular type of tool set. You can develop open source technologies through Kubernetes and many other tools like it to modernize applications using serverless computing with Azure Functions with the use of AI and data to infuse intelligence into your solutions. So this is another way you can help innovate and change and modernize the applications outside the box of what you already have today on premise. You can easily connect applications, data, and devices, taking up to 150 out-of-the-box Azure Logic App connectors for things like Salesforce, Office 365, Twitter, Dropbox, Google services, and many, many more, as well as offering end-to-end management experiences. So the management of it, managing applications, no matter how large or complex they are, you do get that ability to have the choice of how you manage it, whether it's through the Azure portal, PowerShell, you're doing REST APIs, however you choose to manage it, you have that option. Azure can provide the built-in support for things like monitoring, log analytics, patching and backups, and site recovery. Some of the things we'll be covering a little bit later in the presentation as well. Moving a little bit further on there, we have various cycles in here as well to have a secure and well-managed IT foothold on the Azure environment. Two of the biggest things, and we will be covering those in much greater detail a little bit later on, will be the governance and security feature sets here. Those are things that should be forefront in the mind when starting up a new Azure instance, and whether or not you continue it going forward shouldn't be a question of if and more when. You can move more into the configure, the monitor, and the protect phases, which are ongoing phases as the environment matures going forward, as well as the initial phases when you start moving things up into the cloud as well. One of the biggest things to be successful in an era that is increasingly going to the cloud, a lot of businesses must have the visibility and metrics to be able to control and be able to monitor what's going on with regards to issues, monitoring efficiency, optimizing and scaling efficiently, so you're not, costing the company too much money by having servers sitting out there and basically doing nothing for a period of time. And being able to assure that security is still in place, all your compliance and regulatory things are still put in place, and policies are still there to ensure that the velocity is kept. Okay. Moving to the hybridization. The strength of the hybrid strategy here is really about the continuum of capabilities across the offerings, and it's not just about the platform itself. Hybrid is more than just about being more than just about moving applications into the cloud and more than just having connectivity between the cloud and on-premise. There are several critical elements from identity, data, security, and management that have to be addressed when looking about this hybrid connectivity going forward. As you can see on the diagram here, some of those instances are actually being diagrammed here. You don't have to be stuck in an all-in or nothing type of scenario. Hybrid gives you that flexibility. I mentioned this earlier. Highly customizable. In Azure, there's usually 10 to 14 different ways to do the same simple thing. And oftentimes it's what comes down to what works best for your company and best for your organization. One of the biggest things you get into with common identity is an increased end user productivity as well, using Azure Active Directory for single sign-ons to both cloud and on-premise applications. This comes with a wide array of abilities to deploy this type of architecture, whether you control it in a push-up methodology to only allow things pushed up into Azure or allow right back to on-prem for a centralized management is also there as well. You can go beyond your connectivity from your data center to the cloud with a unified cloud platform, ensuring that your on-premise and cloud environments work consistently across your entire organization. So the biggest thing here is it increases your developer productivity by giving a common approach across the board. It allows flexibility for scalability, flexibility in deploying of those apps, whether it be in the cloud or on-premise through Azure Stack Hub. And then you get into the data platform side of things. Obviously, you get into the data side of things. Microsoft is housing all of that for you. It's virtually bottomless. It typically is lower cost overall as far as the storage with highly customizable options as far as how you can put your storage into Azure, which is constantly changing day by day. This can all be done without code changes to your existing environment, keeping your data secured and encrypted through the entire transmission path. You can migrate your SQL Server applications to the cloud with zero downtime using Azure SQL databases as well. And I always want to make sure it's kept out there that everybody understands this is always kept in mind of security, management, and governance as an overarching umbrella over all of this and every part that we're going to talk about here. This allows you to gain the visibility and control with the built-in management and security solutions across your cloud and on-premises environment, regardless of where you're at or if you're deploying Azure Stack Hub or not. You can detect and respond to threats a lot faster and we're using Azure Security Center, which we'll be showing here in a little bit. Enable Azure backups and Azure Site Recovery to help protect against any cloud or on-premise data loss through DR solutions or simply just additional redundancy. So Azure Stack Hub is something to talk about as well, and I mentioned this earlier. So one important thing to think about this is Azure Stack Hub is an extension of Azure. It is a very important of it. It allows you to bring the footprint, which is fairly small, on-prem using approved hardware that Microsoft can then extend their architecture into your environment, and you can utilize workloads on-prem for the Azure cloud environment. Now, a lot of people ask that, what is the reasonings for doing this? And some of the major use cases for this is mostly with regards to applications themselves. Some applications are not supported in Azure natively and might need to be able to be deployed on-prem, but you still want them to be attached to the Azure architecture from a native perspective. There are also hardware reasons to think about it as well. A lot of companies are looking at moving in specific types of hardware that have unique hardware deployments, such as call center servers, not quite ready to stab into the Teams Enterprise Voice side of things. So you might need to put things on-prem for that particular thing. There are also some other reasons to do this as well. So much as deployment side things go with regards to logistics. Anything that's a satellite site to the more extreme conditions like cruise liners or offshore oil rigs are actually good reasons to deploy that different type of architecture as well. So moving into AI for every developer at every scenario side on the intelligence side of things. In addition to having the transitional on-premise data center tools that you would normally have, such as your SQL Server environments or whatever database tools you're using, Azure provides SQL services that connect to data and AI services in Azure as well, something that your on-premise stuff doesn't really have a lot of access to. This enables you to have a quick adoption of technology, such as deploying a global modernization of mobile applications that integrates with facial recognition services, something you may not be doing today. Or it simply could be from botnet frameworks to cognitive services. You can fundamentally change the way your business goes to market with Microsoft's Power AI platforms. Learning as a service is another great option to talk about as well, because you can take advantage of the comprehensive set of services, the infrastructure, and the tools to build platforms that are AI powered, giving experiences to users so that bots can naturally interact with users, and built-in advanced analytics tools to make faster predictions on the data that they're looking at. Elastically scale storage and performance with Azure Cosmos DB, the first globally distributed database service that delivers horizontal scale out and guaranteed single-digit millisecond latency. So a lot of opportunities here for expanding out what you might already be doing on the on-premise environments. Microsoft across the board holds more certifications than any other cloud provider with the various industries. Compliance and trust is not an afterthought for Microsoft. It's one of the first things they talk about with industries when they're looking to expand out their feature sets inside Azure. Microsoft are leaders in this space and help to set standards for global and federal organizations around the world, whether this be regional, industrial, in the individual industries, or global. Microsoft has been talking about trust in the cloud for quite a while now and will continue to do so. And that's why also you'll hear us talk a lot about the security and the compliance and the governance side of things very heavily in these environments. This is not only a sampling of the compliance certifications, and just keep in mind, this is not a comprehensive list of all the certifications that Microsoft offers. These are simply the ones we wanted to showcase during this presentation. Azure strengths are also around security, privacy, and transparency. So the biggest thing here is they provide the security, but also give you the transparency there for you as organizations to be able to see what is going on, be able to control what's happening both on the internal side and the perimeter, and also allow that privacy to only expose what you want to expose in the environments. They also have global coverage. Now you'll see quite a few data centers set up here on the global map, but Microsoft is always expanding their data centers across the board. They're spinning up several new ones every year. They're also the first cloud provider to put data centers in areas such as South Africa. Right now, from a regional perspective, they're at just over 60 Azure regions in 140 countries, which is quite a bit more than AWS and Google combined, actually. So a very large infrastructural footprint and backbone to be able to put your platforms on in their cloud. The approach for Azure takes it a little bit different, as it's important for enterprise customers to have data in specific regions close to employees, but also close to customers as well, to ensure that the unique data handling capabilities are also met. So you do have a lot of customizations there in choosing what regions you want to go to. Now, obviously, that's limited a little bit by different redundancy choices that you have, but you do have customizability there. Azure Security Center is one of the best ways to look at your security footprint overall. It does go over various aspects of the entirety of the environment, and the core implementation of Azure Security Center is actually free. However, there are higher tiers to give you better analytics should it need to be. You can get unified view of the security across all of your on-premise and cloud workloads if you set it up to do so. You can automatically discover and onboard new resources as they come on. So as you're spinning up new IaaS and PaaS resources, they can automatically be brought into Security Center and allow you to apply security policies directly to them. This includes with having to deal with security policies on your hybrid cloud environments as well, and extending that back to on-prem if you should wish to do so. This ensures that compliance and regulatory is also handled from a security perspective from end to end. You can collect, search, and analyze security data from a variety of sources, including firewalls and other partner solutions as you go about looking through this as well. One of the biggest aspects of this is allows you to find vulnerabilities and remediate them quickly. So you can continuously monitor the security of your environment end to end using hundreds of built-in security assessments, or you can create your own. There are tons of security policies already in Security Center that you can feel free to run, or if you have a customized one for a specific workload you want to implement, you can implement your own customized policy as well. Okay. So the next section we're going to take a look at here is the actual Azure Migrate tool itself, how it's evolved over the years, what it does today, and what it does best for your organizations as you look to move into the cloud. So Azure Migration Center, which is the new version of Azure Migrate that has come out. One of the biggest things that we always understand with clients is it's very challenging and intimidating to think about the transition of your business critical environments, investments, and workloads into the cloud itself. One of the biggest goals here at Oakwood is to ensure you feel confident when migrating, know the options that are available to you, and ultimately set up what your best option is going to be for business for a low friction Azure adoption, whether it be as low as a POC all the way up to a full deployment of a data center migration. To that end, there's a couple of points I want to bring up to make sure that everybody understands what's going on in this environment. So Azure Migrate centers around a how-to guidance and technical resources customized by customer scenarios and workloads. So a lot of Q&A went into this, a lot of whiteboarding sessions with Microsoft went into the development of this tool to help refine it to what it is today, to make sure it's the least impact to end users and to give you the most agility and security as you move things up. Azure does provide a rich choice of first-party and third-party assessments and migration tools in this package to help customers meet various workload migration requirements, whether it's a homegrown app or something that you have just bought from a company and you're looking to move it up as a third-party application. There is a fast track option for Azure providers for direct assistance for Azure engineers, working together with the partners such as Oakwood to help customers deploy Azure solutions quickly, confidently, and in a customized manner if the need needs to be there. Okay. All right, so the Azure migration journey across the board. So companies overall, you can join thousands of other customers who are already migrating into Azure by a proven methodology that's already put into place. Microsoft and all their partner tools and a large ecosystem of partners can be leveraged to help you during this move, whether it be a small scale or a large scale. Now, a lot of things we're going to go into here are various sections of this with regards to assessing, migrating, and optimizing this. You start your Azure migration by discovering and assessing, and we'll go over this here in just a sec, assessing your on-premise apps, data, and infrastructure. You can use tools like Azure Migrate and Malware, a third-party solution that Microsoft offers as well, to inventory your entire fleet of servers, databases, and applications. This will help you in your decision-making process to find out what the best target and plan is for you to be able to move this stuff up into Azure. You can start with the least complex workflows to demonstrate quick wins to the organization and move into the more complex ones after that. Resources that are then capacity constrained, reaching out to end support, needing hardware refreshes, or other constraining factors can then be moved in as next candidates as you move forward in the process. The migration process is simply the migration of itself of moving your apps, data, and infrastructure through a confident, proven, powerful tool set that'll guide you through the process of automating it and failing over into a cloud environment when the migration actually happens. And a lot of this is done through a staged migration process. Now, optimization, although it's listed last, is certainly not the last in the minds. It's something that's ongoing from the start to the end, and even going forward when you're in, administration mode in the Azure environment. In Azure, streamlining your cloud resources continuously to enhance security, improve performance, and maximize your return on investment with free cost management tools that are already provided to you. Okay. Here we have an example here of the Microsoft Azure portal. As you can see here, Azure Migrate is listed there, and you can get to it through that particular type of environment. You can also pin it to your start menu here on the main homepage if you wish to as well. And you get started with the environment. So the biggest things you can take a look at here, these are the largest sections of which to migrate your on-premise data center into Azure. You can use comprehensive approach to migrate your applications and data center estate into Azure. One of these ways is getting support for key migration workloads like Windows and Linux servers. Or if you want to go the more data path and go SQL and other database migrations into the environment. Or you can go the route of data, web apps, virtual desktops, and other deployment scenarios that can happen with regards to migrations into Azure. Okay. Migrating Windows VMs falls under another path of servers called server migrations. And we're going to go through a little bit of a demo here through the slides on how that actually works. So Azure Migrate starts here on the main page here. One of the biggest things you'll have is you'll have an organizational section up top and a project details section on the bottom. Your subscription and resource groups, which we'll go over in light detail a little bit further down the line, are your organizational containers of where you want to put these objects as you migrate them into Azure. And your project details will be simply the project for the migration itself. You can put migration project ID down there, as well as the geography of where it's going to be migrated into from a regional standpoint. Once you do that, the next set is to actually set up the Azure Server Assessment. So this is done in a couple different ways. Most notably, you will be doing a discovery process on all the servers. And where I mean by it changes a little bit is most notably whether you're running a VMware environment, a Hyper-V environment where it's all virtualized, or whether you have on-premise servers that are physical or a combination of both. Obviously, you can see here, there's an option here to select VMware Hypervisor or Hyper-V based on your particular environment that you have. And once it's already set up and deployed, you'll get a confirmation that it's set up and you'll generate a key to be able to deploy the application server here. Basically, in this step, the key is used to match the results of the assessment that are later used during the migration phase itself. Okay. Once a key has been generated, the next step really is to take you down to the download section for the appliance to install on the target machines. Once they're configured, virtual machines, you can unpack via a zip file that contains the application that's needed to be able to load it on servers if you wish. Okay. The appliance runs through a checklist to make sure that everything is up to date and ready for uploading prior to actually configuring everything finalization-wise inside Azure itself. Okay. We have compliance components. Different components can make up the appliance tooling of this. Once you have finished doing the initial assessment phase, the next step is to really execute the migration, where Azure has the recommendations that have already been put into place across the board for different ways to optimize and use your technology as you move them into the cloud. As we said earlier, these are the different processes to go through this, and we're going to take a look at the SQL Server Database migration next as a short little demo here as well. Very similar process here. You have a database workflow process where you're going to run a DMA agent, which is a data migration assessment tool to be able to figure out if the data meets compliance to be able to move it up into Azure and if any remediation is required. You obviously have the download itself to be able to download the initial instance to be able to run the tool. Then the actual configuration. You can select your server name that you wish to do, what type of authentication model you wish to do on that. You can provide credentials to your database servers, where you'll be presented with a list of servers to pick from. Details for each instance will be provided, which include the current server version and the size of each database as you're looking to move into there, and you can identify which ones are needed. When you're ready, you can simply click Start to start the assessment, and the data gathering will start and provide recommendations afterwards. The results are provided for your review, which will include identification of any items that may need to be remediated prior to migration or whether you're ready for migration now. Okay. Different containers can also be brought into this as well. The results can also be placed in various areas such as Docker images or container instances to be able to view that stuff for later on. Okay, so next section we're going to go over here is some of the methodologies with regards to how you move things into Azure. There are a lot more than just these four, which you'll see in a later slide, but these are the four we're going to focus on today, which will be Rehost, Refactor, Rearchitect, and Rebuild. In rehosting an application, often referred to as the forklift or lift and shift migration, there is no code option that lets you migrate your existing applications to Azure quickly. Each application is migrated as is, which provides the benefits of the cloud without the risks or costs of making code or refactoring changes. One of the biggest things to use when using this is if you need to just move an application from your data center to the cloud quickly, this is the quickest way to do it by far. Your apps may need to be architected to leverage a specific type of Azure IaaS scalability or service. Or if your business requires the application but does not need to change the capabilities of it right away. One of the ways that methodologies that can be taken is doing a rehost into Azure and then doing a modernization, refactor, or rearchitect later on as well. Next, we have the refactor. So refactoring is often called repackaging and is the cloud migration approach that basically lets you minimize altering the application code or apply configuration changes necessary to connect the application to Azure Platform as a Service services and take better advantage of the cloud itself. Perfectly good example of this. You can move your existing apps into Azure App Services or Azure Kubernetes. You can also refactor your relational and non-relational databases into Azure SQL Database managed instances. It also includes Azure Databases for MySQL, Azure Databases for PostSQL, as well as Cosmos DB. Rearchitecting is the next phase of it, and that would be the modifying or extending of an existing application's code to optimize the application architecture for cloud scalability. A pretty good example here is decompose a monolithic application into microservices that work together and readily scale as opposed to one giant application, and re-architect your relational and non-relational databases to Azure fully managed DB as a service solutions like Azure SQL managed instances. One of the biggest reasons to use this particular platform is if your applications need a major revision to incorporate new capabilities or to work more effectively on a cloud platform, or if you would like to make use of existing cloud application investments. And last but certainly not least is the rebuild itself. Rebuilding an application from scratch using cloud-native technologies from Azure is what we're looking at here. For example, building a new greenfield application with cloud-native technologies like serverless Azure AI, Azure SQL Database Managed Instances, Azure Cosmos DB, and many others. One of the main reasons, or a few of the main reasons really, to use this particular type of methodology is if you're ready to build new applications using cloud-native technologies as a greenfield deployment, or you simply want to build innovative apps talking to the advantage in the advancements in AI, blockchain, and IoT. Next, we have a section here on the Microsoft Azure Security and Governance, which, as I stated earlier, should be something that should be in the thoughts of everyone and minds of everyone for discussion across the board. We started with Azure Security Center, which is something we did talk about a little bit earlier, but I want to make sure it's also known to everybody again and reiterate that it is a no-cost option to initially get started, and you can always tack on more things in addition to that at a later on time frame. And it literally takes minutes to go in there and take a look and see exactly what's going on with some fine tuning in there as well. And you can also add governance and regulatory stuff in there as well. If you have specific type of regulatory compliance policies you need to add into there, such as PCI or SOX, those can be added and graded upon as well in the Security Center, and you will get recommendations and a rating on it. It is always recommended to make sure that all services are connected to this. So obviously there are easy ways to enroll items into Azure as they get brought up into there as well. Next phase, we have control access through Azure VM access through various aspects of this. So I have a diagram here on the right. And the idea behind this is you have logical containers. You have the Azure tenant itself. Below that, you have Azure subscriptions. And drilling down a bit further, you have the resource groups. Hierarchy to all of that, you have what's called management groups. Management groups can be used to manage individual subscriptions or resource groups in an overarching structure based on RBAC and security compliance that you put in there. Users and resources that are placed in management groups have the access that's granted to them across overarching subscriptions, and this can be regardless of the topology that's also being placed. If you have certain subscriptions that are placed out in the environment that allow you to then have a particular type of user set manage certain areas. This also includes visibility. You can fully customize who can access what when, if it's even visible to the user, and when it's been able to be accessed with regards to perimeter access or even just VM access itself. Now you can have up to 10,000 management groups in a single directory or a single tenant. This tree can support nested groups up to 6 levels deep. So you can have management groups with inside management groups if you need that added customization there. All right. Moving on from there, we have security privilege access on RBAC. Very important stuff to talk about is the roles in Azure. They don't necessarily translate directly to the roles that you might have on premise and Active Directory. A few examples of which you've got virtual machine contributor, classic virtual machine contributor, security admins, and dev test lab users. The main 4 sections you have here are the reader, the resource-specific custom roles, the contributor, and the owner. So owners are your admins. They'll have unadulterated access to manage the resource itself, as well as the actual resource contents. Contributors have no ability to manage the object itself, hence they can't delete or move or rename objects, but they can access the content therein or be able to remote into IaaS VMs if needed. Resource-specific custom roles is also in that as well because it can be customized very heavily as far as what you have access to. You might have network admins that may only need to have access to network security groups to open up firewall ports, but you don't want them to change subnets. That customization can be done. And then you also have the readers as well, who would just have the ability to have read-only access to whatever has been granted to them and not anything outside of that, and have no ability to modify anything. Certain instances do go outside of those normals, such as dev test labs, where you can spin up a lab, much you have in the lower right there, which is a completely encapsulated environment. And then you can control who can do what in that environment, what thresholds are set, and who can actually traverse outside of that bubble if need be. Endpoint protection and anti-malware is also very important in the Windows environment as far as Azure is concerned. You should look at doing this as is not native into Azure by itself. You'll need to look at doing anti-malware from endpoint protection solutions such as Trend Micro, Broadcom, McAfee, Windows Defender, and System Center endpoint protection. This allows you to have the real-time protection, scheduled scanning, and malware remediation for everything that comes out and give you that degree of protection that's required for the environment. And this can all integrate into Azure Security Center to allow you for the ease of deployments and the built-in detections of alerts and incidents. Azure JIT, or just-in-time access, is also very important. It's something to be talked about in the environment. It's a little bit different from your RBAC style access. So just-in-time access allows you to lock down the inbound traffic of VMs through network security groups, or NSGs, to allow specific users to only have access during certain times. Let's say you have a project that lasts 2 weeks, and you are going to grant access for a team to have access to these resources for a duration of 2 weeks. You can set that up as a policy, and it will automatically enable and disable the access as required. As you can see on the right-hand side there from the screenshot, users also have the ability to request access to a resource and then are prompted to fill out a form for the nature, purpose, and duration of how they will need to access those resources in Azure. And those tickets can then be automatically approved or denied by individuals and have their access granted. Moving on to the governance side of things, Azure tagging for security is something that I like to bring up quite a bit with everyone. It's something that you should be thinking about from the very get-go. And tagging may sound simple, whereby you're simply adding text tags to an environment for resources for various purposes. This can include by division to identify what resources are in a specific team, what project they're attached to, if you're doing chargeability or chargeback to individual resources, things like that. This can all be regulated and controlled through a process that allows you to basically, every time a new resource is spun up, to allow you to say these tags are required and you must fill them out prior to a resource being spun up. Those can then be translated into reports, both from a security and a governance perspective, to show who is using what resources at what time, how much cost a specific type of tag resource is actually accumulating by project, or however you classify those tags themselves. We're going to move into Oakwood's process now. How moving customers into the cloud is different for the way that we approach things versus other vendors out there. And we approach this with a 4-phase approach. And this starts with a readiness assessment, a foundations phase, migrate and modernize, and then optimize and manage. One of the things here at Oakwood that we believe in is that success is made possible through the cloud that should be accessible to every business and every organization, whether it be small or large, old or new. We are very confident that there's never been a better time to assess all of your applications, your data, and your infrastructure, and look at them to move into Azure, obviously with people transitioning more and more to working from home. One of the biggest concerns people come up with nowadays is, where do we start? Don't worry about that. That's why we're here to help you. We have a proven approach for migrating organizations, and we've done hundreds of these just like yours. We identified 4 fundamental phases that we're going to talk about in more detail here in a minute to ensure that you have a successful move into the cloud. Biggest problems addressing today are the modernization of data centers across the board. It's not just hardware out there, and the most expensive and capable hardware won't get you all of these across the board. And it's everything from the people, the process, and the technology standpoint as well. There are 7 types of application modernization. A few of these we've gone over in this presentation as well. We have gone over the rebuild, rearchitect, refactor, and rehost sections as well. But there are also some least impactful ways as well. You can go with replace model, which is switching to a different product. retain or revisit, which is keeping applications in their current environment with no changes as they are today to look at them later on down the road, or retire applications that are no longer needed or have reached end of life. Okay. Readiness assessment phase typically starts with a readiness assessment on the data. We use the MoveAir tool, which is by Microsoft, to create an existing inventory of all the physical and virtual servers in the environment, as well as providing what's called the application readiness assessment to be able to look at the application dependencies, look to see what applications are talking to what over the network, as well as an inventory of all the applications and workloads that are loaded on each server, and thereby creating a inventory and report of these as well. Discover phase here is simply used to evaluation of the process to take a look at the environment and application review, talk with stakeholder interviews, do whiteboarding sessions and calls, have work stream definitions, and be able to conduct workshops with key stakeholders as well as the engineers and the SMEs on projects to be able to understand the environment and make sure all the data is gathered. Here's a great example of one of many whiteboarding sessions that we do. Typically, they're 3 to 4 whiteboards at a time, and it's a very long and lengthy process. We want to make sure that everything is captured end to end when talking to an organization. This particular slide does show some of the complexities in Azure. One of the biggest things we get asked is, isn't it simply just spinning up some, networking up there and moving some VMs in there? Well, to dip your feet in the waters, absolutely, that's as simple as it is. But there's many more services that are out there that can help, modernize the environment. Changing things from IaaS to PaaS services, allowing for, analytics and IoT and intelligence to make a play to make things easier, more agile and secure as you move forward. Here's some Azure services and recommendations for app modernization based on the different fabrics out there. You have Azure Virtual Machines, App Services, the Kubernetes services, Service Frameworks, Azure Functions, Azure Batches, and ACI, or the Azure Container Instances as well. Quite a few data modernization options as well with regards to SQL servers. You have the on-premise environment where you have a SQL Server on-prem. Basically no migrations or changes, and you can have hybridization scenarios where should you keep those back on-prem. You can have SQL servers as Azure VMs, the IaaS option inside Azure. Or you can go with the highly scalable and highly redundant managed instances PaaS service from SQL up in Azure as well. From that, we move on to the next phase, which is the Azure Foundations process. The Azure Foundations process is where a lot of the networking and stuff is built out. Our team will aim to eliminate any future pain points with systematic process of properly setting up your tenant, making sure the containers are set up correctly, and making sure all the networking is put in place. This is done through resource groups and tagging, monitoring, security and account setups through RBAC, as well as other instances, and the networking itself. Once that foundational level is set up and connectivity is set up throughout the board from a foundational standpoint, move on to the Migrate and Modernize. Oakwood offers our proprietary set of tools and approaches called our Cloud Ascent tools, where we'll leverage these tools to help identify dependencies and application groupings to be able to migrate in the highest level of efficiency and effectivity. Groups of servers, one or many, based on the application dependencies previously identified within our assessment phase that was done in earlier sections. Cloud Migration Factories here inside the Cloud Ascent tools basically is a tool to assist in the cloud migrations through dependency risks and identification of applications ideal for moving into either PaaS or SaaS offerings. Can also be used for IaaS and PaaS mappings for cost savings as well going forward. During this phase, from the Migrate and Modernize phase, we look at the Refactor, Rehost, or other methodologies that go into that with regards to changing the way the applications are sitting today, whether they're on standard VMs, and moving them into these more Microsoft PaaS services to be able to reduce cost, increase efficiency, agility, and scalability as well. An example of our maturity model that we have here, which is a continuous improvement process across the board with regards to how we approach each individual phase of this environment, and includes feedback from the clients across the board. We want to make sure we're part of your team and that we're making sure we always have the best interests of the client put forth ahead of time, so to make sure you understand exactly what we're trying to accomplish, as well as adhere to Microsoft best practices. Okay. And last but certainly not least is the optimize and manage section. And this particular section should be thought about from start to finish and even past. And this is where you stay secure through a well-managed and cost-efficient after-move process. In this phase, you can use Azure Security and Management resources to govern, secure, and monitor your cloud applications in Azure. You can begin using these services during your migration and post-migration as well with Azure Hybrid support. Continue using them for as long as you wish for a consistent experience across your hybrid environment. Security is very heavily in mind there, so I'm going to bring that up as well. So rely on the Azure Security Center for that unified security management and advanced threat protection for the entire environment across the board. And allow it to protect by granting the proper amount of access and having the correct amount of redundancy put in place through Azure Backup, Azure Site Recovery, and many other feature sets that are available inside Azure.